Greetings, everyone. This is Krista Nash. Thanks for joining me today for this episode of the podcast. For those who are watching on video, you'll see I am not in my normal location, and that is because I'm at a conference, this time in Orlando, Florida. It is focused on building a great law firm, really, and executing on vision. And so last year, actually, it was a year ago that I decided I was going to rename my firm, rebrand, and really focus on how to help really create a dialogue and try to help change family law for the better to help children really thrive. So here I am again. I'm excited to see what I will learn and the things that I will develop out of this conference. But it also is a great opportunity because it gives me some time to pause. And this is a really important topic that I'm going to be addressing with you all today. And so it's nice to have some space to be able to do that thinking. And so I hopefully can present this to you in a way that is clear. This is going to be the beginning of an important dialogue. And I really think that a podcast about family law would really be missing an important elephant in the room and a very key topic for children if we didn't address truly head on the issue of domestic violence and child abuse. At the start of 2025, I am excited to tell you that I will be bringing on the podcast a series of guests, both national and local leaders, who will debate and unpack these very important dynamics that really are on the forefront of family law and are pretty controversial right now, really. We'll have two national leaders in this conversation. They are psychologists, and they have varying perspectives on this issue. We'll also have a judge from Arizona who has a national presence in discussing evidentiary and due process perspectives. And then some other people, like a local psychologist, discussing how he and I do cases together and how we manage these hard dynamics in the cases in which we work. I'll also be talking to domestic violence experts and people who've gone through this. So I hope you'll stay tuned for all of those very important episodes, and I will be bringing those to you after the holidays as we start January. As things continue to evolve, it is critically important that we all understand and pay attention to this issue. And I think we all have an obligation to do the work to understand what is happening. I do apologize ahead of time, as it's going to be a lot of information and a lot of law to digest, but I hope you'll stick with me, and I think you'll leave far more informed about these really crucially important dynamics. As background, for those who are really not in law or don't have much experience in this, I want you to understand there are two different court systems that deal with the safety and well-being of children. There really are more than that, but the two I want to explain to you are the dependency and neglect system to start. Okay, in that system, we have concerns of child welfare that gets submitted to the state, and the state evaluates whether kids are safe, whether parents or a parent needs to be held responsible for failing to care for a child, or for putting a child in danger or neglecting a child, and what to do about it. This is the court system that can get activated when Child Protective Services gets called, when you call 911 and say I saw something happening to a child. This is also where mandatory reporters have to call into. I'm a mandatory reporter in my child cases. Teachers are mandatory reporters, doctors, and lots of people are mandatory reporters. So that's how these get triggered. Sometimes it leads to criminal charges. Sometimes kids are removed and they're sent to foster care or a kin or relative placement. There are often safety plans put in place, and if a formal case opens for dependency and neglect, then the parent or parents have to work with caseworkers and a variety of people to learn to be better parents. And if they fail at that, then sometimes the kids never return. Importantly, the parties in that case are the people of the state or the county sometimes versus the parents. And the state comes in a parental way on behalf of society, basically, and says, you have to do better. You have to keep your kids safe. You have to at least be a passably good parent or else. And these parents, they do have fundamental rights to be parents, but because they are alleged at least to have messed that up, and the state has had to step in and say, we're taking over if you don't get it together, parental rights actually can be terminated completely, that you'd have your parental rights potentially taken away completely if the proper steps are taken and the parent or the parents fail. So that is very different to the domestic relations court, which is a system that handles divorce, legal separation, allocation of parental responsibilities for even unmarried parents in conflict. There, the parties are one parent versus the other. So sometimes we have other people involved, like grandparents. We call those interveners usually, meaning they're intervening in the case. But importantly, it is one individual versus another, not the state versus an individual. So it's also a type of civil case. We have criminal cases, civil cases in our system, but in this vein, we are talking about a civil case between not two businesses like you would normally have in a civil situation, or maybe a neighbor versus a neighbor, but a civil case, a parent versus a parent, or sometimes a grandparent versus a parent. These are the domestic courts. In deciding where kids will spend time and who makes decisions for them, in a divorce, for example, parents have fundamental rights to be parents. And these are big constitutional rights. The seminal case on this is called Troxel. That's Troxel. And you will hear judges and lawyers and some articles and commentators use Troxel a lot in these conversations. And essentially, it stands for the proposition that parents have a fundamental right above others to take care of and see and make decisions for their children. So even if the parents are splitting up, there's a pretty big expectation that both parents are going to be involved with kids. The problem, though, comes that in many of these domestic cases, we also have a lot of kids in danger. They are not dependency neglect cases necessarily, or they haven't been labeled as such. But we have some very bad parents sometimes, and we have some very bad allegations sometimes. And there's some parents who maybe shouldn't have a ton of parenting time or responsibilities. The key question now infiltrating the entire domestic court landscape across the country and really beyond is, how do we balance parental rights in a fight between parents and the best interests of the children when there are allegations of domestic violence, child abuse, and child sexual abuse, or child sexual abuse? So enter Kayden's law. Kayden was a 7-year-old little girl from Pennsylvania who in 2018 was tragically killed by her father during court-ordered unsupervised parenting time, which had been granted despite her mother raising safety concerns during the custody litigation. This led to legislation in Pennsylvania after her death, really her mother being very key in pushing the legislature, influencing the legislature to make changes to increase protections for kids in these domestic court cases in Pennsylvania. Later, there was a federal act called the Keeping Children Safe from Violence Act, which is also called Kayden's Law, even though the original Kayden's Law is really the main Kayden's Law in Pennsylvania. This Keeping Children Safe from Violence Act went into effect in early 2022 federally through the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women's Act. Now, those are basically suggestions that come with ties for money, because these are state issues, not federal issues, which means that not just Colorado, but every state has to essentially adopt this, but they tie money to it a lot, the feds do, and it incentivizes states to ensure that kids, basically that we adopt what the feds are asking them to adopt. So Colorado basically later became the first state to adopt this law through its state legislature in 2023. And the federal law basically does a few things, and I'll get into what Colorado's does, but the federal law incentivizes states to ensure that the child custody laws protect at-risk children in a few different ways. In Colorado, we have what is now codified in Colorado Revised Statutes 1410 127.5. That is now Colorado's version of Kayden's Law. And it's become very important nationally because Colorado is a leader in basically adopting most of the federal law that I explained to you a second ago. So for me, as a legal representative of the children in these courts, really a best interest attorney, I use this now as a very important tool in cases where I have factors that are basically leading to conclusions of domestic violence, child abuse, and child sexual abuse. And it is doing really important things, like it's forcing better training of experts in court. It's insisting on judges and the whole system taking domestic violence and other forms of abuse more seriously. In fact, in this law, the legislature declares straight up in the law that a child's safety is the first priority of the court in a proceeding affecting the child's care and custody. And this is a little bit different than saying that the parents' rights are the most important thing, which is the criticism